All right, guys, let's kick off. Firstly, thank you very much for everyone who's joined today's call. We've already got 25 people on the call, which is fantastic. And today we are focusing our session with Caorunn, 7th of February, and it was a great session yesterday, and I'm looking forward to a fantastic session today. Just before we kick off, just wanted to say a couple of words. So firstly, housekeeping points, please make sure any questions you've got, drop them in the chat, and we will answer those questions at the end of the session. And secondly, please make sure, if you haven't already, you are muted. So just before we hand over to Stuart, Rachel is just going to say a couple of words. So Rachel.
Hi everyone, nice to see you all. Thanks for joining the call today. So I am the account manager from International Beverage, based up in Scotland, but look after you guys as a UK group. For those that don't know, International Beverage and yourself actually have the same parent company. So today, Stuart Baxter is our brand ambassador, and he will be taking you through the Caorunn presentation, and look forward to some questions at the end. Okay, Stuart.
Cool. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. This is the 5th one, I believe you're all doing. So I'm looking forward to it. We're going to keep this clean cut. It's going to be fairly straightforward, hitting the points, some key points that I'll keep picking up on. But as I said, any questions at the end, of course, as Richard said, please just let me know and we'll go over them in detail. So what we're going to be covering, go through here, make sure I get the right one. So today we're going to be covering Caorunn, pronounced Caorunn, you can see phonetically at the bottom. And what we're going to be going through is, can everyone see that okay? I can see you, Richard and Rachel, yeah? All good? Perfect. What we're going to go through is a little bit about the production of gin in general. I'm going to spend a couple of slides on that. The reason being is we have a very unique process that we produce at Caorunn. And then we're going to talk a little bit about us, where we come from, a little bit of our heritage. And then we're going to talk about the botanicals that we use. It's a really important part to, well, all gins, but with Caorunn, it's a huge selling point for us. And then that's effectively going to be it. It's going to be nice, quick, and clean, and we'll get it organized. So to talk specifically about Caorunn, where we get our name from, I don't know if anyone knows, I'm not going to ask for anyone to answer just yet, but Caorunn means rowan berry or rowan tree in Gaelic. Now, a lot of you will have seen about 1,000 rowan trees because they are ubiquitous across the United Kingdom. I have one in my back garden. I can actually see one out the window just now. They are the small red berries that grew in trees that, it might just have been me, you were told not to eat as a child. So you'll have seen them every single street in the United Kingdom. And some of you will know what I'm talking about, some of you won't, but we'll show a picture of them in a few slides. But that's what it means. And that's actually where we get our logo from, is that on the base of every single rowan berry, if you pluck it off, you'll actually see that 5-starred logo. So that's where Caorunn comes from, and that's where we get our emblem. But we'll jump straight into our production. Here we go. So gin production, there are 2 main ways in which we can produce gin. There are other ways. We can talk about vacuum packing. We can talk about even steeping in like room temperature, neutral grain spirit. But there are 2 main ways. And the process is very, very simple. We take a neutral spirit. That can be either a malt spirit or a grain spirit. In Caorunn, we use grain. And then we introduce botanicals to it. That's the fundamental process in which gin is produced. And the 2 main ways in which we do it are steep and boil. Is first, steep and boil is the most common method. Botanicals are soaked in neutral spirit, and then the mixture is distilled throughout it, and then we get a final gin. The other way is the way in which we do it. We have another more unique process, but the other way is vapor infusion. It's exactly what you think it is. Instead of making contact with the actual liquid spirit that is distilled, it is boiled, it's turned into vapor, and then the vapor infuses through the botanicals, and then it is condensed back into a liquid. It's a little bit of science, but it's very, very straightforward. I hope that if anyone wants me to cover it at the end, we absolutely can. But we do use vapor infusion. However, the way in which we do it is slightly different. We use this thing at the bottom that I'm going to go through in just a minute. It's called the copper berry chamber, through which we diffuse or vaporize our spirit, and it passes through these trays and all the botanicals. But as I said, we're going to get into the minutes. That's the main 2 ways in which we produce. So what we do is vapor infusion. Now, types of gin. There are a number, but the one we're really going to focus on is London Dry Gin, which I'm sure a lot of you know, and I teach you to suck eggs here, is that London Dry Gin is, of course, high quality neutral alcohol, natural flavoring, and the only substance that can be added is water, but it's mainly a drier side of it. The way in which we describe Caorunn is London Dry, however, coining the kind of phrase modern London Dry, just because, again, of the process in which we make it, that I'm going to go through in just a minute. But this all came, the London Dry especially came through from 1831 from a guy called Aeneas Coffey, who invented the coffee still. So he invented the coffee still, and it's still used today in grain production, which we use specifically. We do not use any malt spirit, despite the fact being based at a malt distillery. So on every bottle of Caorunn, you'll see 1824. That is the year in which a place called Balmenach Distillery was founded. And this is where Balmenach is located. So right in the heart of Speyside, not far from Granton on Spey, if anyone knows of it. So we're right in the heart of the Scottish Highlands. So 1824, Balmenach Distillery was founded, but 2009 is in fact when Caorunn was founded as a brand. And the reason that we talk about Balmenach Distillery is that we are located in the old filling store of Balmenach, meaning where we used to fill the casks is where we actually make Caorunn gin now. There's a little image here. So founded in 1824, but on the right-hand side of this image, just onto the two right-hand sides of the pagodas here is the old filling store, and that's where we produce Caorunn, and that's where we've installed all of the processing. We're quite focused on sustainability throughout the portfolio and across our distilleries, and Balmenach and Caorunn are no exception. Caorunn specifically, we use all of the excess or all of the heat energy that we take to use within the distillery is all taken from Balmenach. If Balmenach is not producing single malt whiskey, which it still does today, we cannot produce any Caorunn gin. All of the heat and all of the energy is excess from the single malt distillery. So anything, there's no wastage from the Balmenach distillery, and of course we're using the excess, so everything is used within Caorunn as a whole. Here is the Copperberry Chamber as promised. Now, the Copperberry Chamber is unique to us, and I know I've already exhausted that point, and it's the one thing I kind of want you to take away from the process point of Caorunn. This is a piece of equipment from the 1920s. Now, if anyone does know, in the 1920s in the United States, we had something called Prohibition. Now, you legally could not make gin. However, you were legally allowed to make alcohol-based perfume and aftershave. Alcohol-based perfume and aftershave, and alcohol was a really good substance because it allowed to carry flavor through in it. And that's why still today we've got a lot of alcohol-based perfumes and aftershaves. And that's why we want higher levels of alcohol in our spirits, because it carries flavor beautifully. So if you couldn't make gin or alcohol because it was illegal to sell on the market, you could legally make any perfumes and aftershaves. So I'm sure a few of these were used to actually put a pipe into the local bar and actually start serving booze. It was only recently that the gin community actually discovered that Copperberry chambers were used to make alcohol, not just perfume and aftershave. But this is the equipment that we use. So it's a small chamber. You can see Simon Bewley, our head gin maker's hand for scale, that we use 4 drawers and fill all 11, which I'll go through, all 11 of our botanicals into that drawer and vapor infuse all the way through and condense it on top. But of course, with 1920s equipment comes some problems of its own and some challenges that we face within the distillery, not just the size of batches that we can produce, because this is the only working one in the world, but the size of batches we can produce. But of course, if we try and add anything beyond 1960s technology, there's really no chance that we're going to be able to attach it efficiently or even well enough that we can advance what we're doing. So making Caorunn, do step by step. There's a few steps to it, but we'll show the whole map of this at the very end. We are produced in small batches. The capacity that we can run through the Copperberry chamber at any one time is roughly 1,000 litres per batch. And we take 96% grain alcohol. The grain alcohol we use is wheat-based spirit. And we pass that from that to, and that passes through to our vaporizer that we have nicknamed Little Rocket. This is the only other piece of equipment that is actually copper lined. Everything else is stainless steel. So it's just the vaporizer and the Copperberry chamber that are copper lined. The reason being is copper is a really good way to strip out any impurities within the spirit. Of course, you'll see copper stills in a lot of whiskey distilleries. So copper is a very good way of stripping out any impurities. And of course, since we're vaporizing our spirit here, it's very, very good to have a lot of copper contacts. So we're actually stripping it out before it infuses with our botanicals. So you can see from that too, it passes into the bottom section of the vaporizer and then passes up and out the top. And these are placed next to each other. So underneath, you have two sections that runs through all of the botanicals underneath the 4 drawers, up and out. So right in the copper berry chamber was all the infusion happens. So this happens technically 1.5 times every single time. So the botanicals used are roughly 1.5 times every single time we distill, and I'll explain what that means in just a second. So, world's only copper berry chamber, getting a little bit more detailed into it. As we said, in 1920s America to extract essential oils to make aftershave and perfume, but this is the tray system that we look at. So these are the 5 botanicals. I'll talk about these in just a second, but the one thing that's quite important is when we put all of the botanicals in, the only one that cannot go in every single drawer is actually heather. So heather is one of our 5 forest botanicals, and the reason that we can't put it into a drawer higher is that all of these are filled with mesh screening. If heather goes any higher, the small leaves or the small petals actually fly into our condenser, and we'd actually have to flood it maybe once a month, as opposed to now where we can do it every 18 months. So if you ever go to visit Caorunn, you'll actually see that we've got a wall built in, so we can actually flood the whole room and clean through the condenser, because inevitably we do have to do it after a while. So heather's the only one that will go in the bottom tray, but every other botanical feature in every single tray throughout. These are, again, a very important part. However, probably the key ones are our cool blush apples and our rowan berry at the top left. So we forage these 5 Celtic botanicals from within a 10-minute walk of the distillery. These you don't have to remember, because the great thing is on the top of every single cork of Caorunn, you will find these 5 botanicals. So if any customers ask, you can just point the bottle towards them, the cork towards you, and you can read them off the top and pretend that you know what you're talking about. But the rowan berry is the key one, because that's, of course, where we get our namesake. I'm sure a lot of you will now recognize these that sit on trees across the UK, but these are the berries that I'm talking about with the feathered leaves, and then you can just see the 5-pointed star that sits on the bottom of every single one of them. So obviously they're ubiquitous, we can get them all over the UK, but we do forage them within a 10-minute walk of the distillery. We use heather, which if anyone's been to Scotland, you will know is everywhere. Cool blush apple, they're the most northernly grown apple in the world. So you'll actually find them as far up as into Norway, into northern Finland, but they do grow in Scotland quite comfortably. They're very small, they're quite tart and acidic to eat on their own, but of course, when you extrapolate that and utilize vaporization, you can actually get a really sweet, juicy flavor that runs from them. Dandelion, you can get in every single driveway across the UK as well. It's absolutely everywhere, but that gives us this lovely kind of freshness and kind of vegetal quality to the spirit. And bog myrtle. I finish on this because bog myrtle gets a little bit of a bad rap because it sounds ugly, but it's actually a very fragrant, almost kind of albus oil, very diluted albus oil kind of note. I go camping most years with friends, and midges, if anyone knows what they are the worst thing in the world. They absolutely adore me. They ignore my girlfriend, they ignore most of my friends, but they absolutely love my blood. Midge repellent doesn't work. I will watch them land on my arm and bite me with midge repellent. However, bog myrtle, it's a kind of grass growing, it grows quite low to the ground, it's a bush. If you rub that on the inside of your arms, your neck, it actually helps beautifully. It gets rid of them a lot better. I'm not guaranteeing anything. There's T's and C's here. I'm not guaranteeing anything, but it does help quite a lot. So bog myrtle sounds quite ugly, but smells quite fragrant and keeps beasties away. Not all, just midges specifically. But those are the 5 forage botanicals that give us our unique flavor. And I think that's fair to say, because the other 6 that we're going to talk about, you will find in most gins. And Simon's attitude when he created Caorunn was not to create something that was too vegetal or too juniper-led or too citrus-led. He wanted to create something that was fairly balanced. And there's nothing wrong with being balanced. There's nothing wrong with being too citrus-led. I believe you guys did Tanqueray the other day, and they do this amazing job of capturing that, especially in number 10, that citrusy flavor. They do this amazing job of doing that, and it's stunning, and that's exactly what consumers are demanding. And what Simon wanted to do was just create something that allowed people to pick out everything within it, just depending on who you are as an individual. So that was his objective with Caorunn. And these are the other 6. Going through these fairly quickly, how much time for time? I'm actually okay for a few minutes. Lemon peel, lemon citrus, coriander giving that kind of peppery note, cassia bark. Everyone knows cassia bark, actually. If anyone is if anyone likes to cook at home, cassia bark is cinnamon. We've been lied to for years. If you go to your spice rack now and find cassia bark, cinnamon, it'll say in the back from cassia bark. Cinnamon is quite expensive. That Christmas smell that we all know and love is cassia bark. It is not cinnamon, because cassia bark grows faster, it's cheaper to produce, but that is what we all know as cinnamon. Orange peel. So I think right now in the batches where it's Sicilian orange that we're using, Angelica root gives, it's a binder. It's actually Angelica root on its own, I'm not a massive fan of, but most gins will use it because it helps bind all of these flavors. It's like mustard in cooking. It helps bring everything together. And of course, technically you can't really have gin without juniper. So juniper is obviously the key ingredient to most gins, but with Simon, he wanted to make sure that was not necessarily the most prominent flavor, but obviously to bring in that recognition that it is definitely a gin that we're producing. Should be fine for time. Now, that's after we've infused all the botanicals. It comes to the condenser on top, and the first sections that are coming off are going into faint tank 1, and they will be redistilled. So when I say those botanicals use 1.5 times, they'll run through again, but it's a much smaller batch because the vast majority will go and be finalized as Caorunn. Now, of course, I've had the pleasure of tasting this. Rachel, I think you have too. 96% Caorunn liquid is what comes off the end of this still. It is lethal, smells amazing, but it is of course lethal. We do dilute that down to 41.8%. As much as whiskies do that and other gins do that, we will dilute that down to 41.8% as to not kill you, because 96% Caorunn is delicious. However, it is 4% water and 96% pure alcohol, which is not good for anyone. But yes, 1,000 litre batches, so genuine small batch gin. And this is the process that we ran through. The VAT2 into the vaporizer, up into the condenser. Faint tank 1 will collect X amount, just depending on the batch and how hot and cold it was that day, and not lying, that's actually true. And then the rest will go into our final VAT number 3 to be collected as Caorunn. And of course, you know the bottle, 41.8% modern London dry. The 1824, as I said, is from Balmenich. The star comes from each of the Caorunn berries. Marketing lost their mind when they realized that we have 5 Forge botanicals and a 5-pointed star. That just stars aligned for them. They were ecstatic. And then on the base of every single bottle, of course, you can't see it here, is that it's actually the symbol as well on the bottom of every single bottle that I've got just here. Find it every single one. Strong, sturdy bottle. Can smash through most things with it, which is ideal because you can drop that as many times as you want in the bar and you will still be able to pour a nip out of it. And the only other thing to mention about the bottle is on the back label of the front label, but the back of the front label, it's confusing, is actually a Celtic symbol for each of the 5 foraged botanicals. It's our Easter egg equivalent on the label. So if you look at the back of the front label, you'll actually see the Celtic symbol for each of the 5 foraged botanicals that we use out of the total 11. Now, I know it was a whirlwind. I think we managed that in just over 15 minutes, Rachel, if you can correct me. But I wanted to keep it short, sweet, hit the points. And if there's any questions at this point, please just let me know. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Stuart. I mean, guys, do you have any questions? Because if you do, just drop them in the chat. If you've got Caorunn in front of you, please feel free to give it a taste if you haven't already. In terms of a straight G&T, so if someone comes to the bar and orders a straight G&T from a Caorunn, from your advice perspective, what would be the garnish for a perfect serve perspective? Just make sure we're getting that right at hotel level.
For a gin and tonic perfect serve, the tonic that the customer wants, and then red apple is our garnish.
Cool. Okay. Any questions at all, guys? In that case, I'll just stop your screen there. In that case, thank you very much indeed, Stuart and Rachel, for today's session. Just to plug tomorrow's session. So tomorrow, Wednesday, the 8th of Feb, we've got a session with Remy Cointreau, and that session is going to be on 2 brands that we list through Remy Cointreau, and that is Mount Gay, our rum brand, and Cointreau as directly. So the two brands that we'll be covering tomorrow is Mount Gay and Cointreau. There is one up. Yeah, so we've got a question from someone around which, from your advice, Stuart, which tonic would you recommend with Caorunn?
Yeah, honestly, it's really up to the consumer because everyone's different. I used to really despise quinine, so I used to like Mediterranean tonic or low or no quinine tonic, and that was the way I like it. Now I absolutely adore quinine. I can't get enough of it. It really is down to the customer and what they want. I mean, but it is a personal preference. It would be a loaded question for me, or a loaded answer for me to give you a specific, because then we're trying to force that upon anyone. There's so many tonics out there, so many sodas. Mix, match, experiment, but I would always ask the consumer if they've got a preference. And there's an opportunity to upsell as well for you as a business there.
Brilliant. All right, guys, we'll end the call there. Thanks again, Stuart. Thanks again, Rachel, and everyone. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 4 o'clock for Remy Cointreau. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.